The magnificent Sinclair is, bar none, the weirdest hero ever introduced to Deadlock. And of course he's another Hopu creation, go figure. Sinclair is, in my opinion, the most misunderstood hero in the game. He has one of the lowest pick rates, and I really think a lot of people are playing him wrong. When I say that people don't know how to play Sinclair, I mean that his most useful playstyle is obfuscated and lacks clarity. In my opinion, this is because it's not the most intuitive way to play him at all. Because Magician has infinite escape with his assistant, and because people hardly buy slowing Hex to counter this, he can effectively pressure walkers whenever he wants. Even if the enemy team buys slowing Hex, Magician can just buy Dispel Magic. Are we really calling it that? Are we really not reverting the name change to debuff remover? Whatever. In any case, you can't really stop Magician. I really think Curse or Cursed Relic, I guess if you want to call it that, or Cursed Relic, whatever, should cancel out Assistant. It really seems like it should count as a buff that can get wiped. But in both cases, Sinclair can simply buy Unstoppable and then still have infinite escape. A lot of people don't know this, which is why I think Sinclair is so misunderstood. Instead, what I see most often from Sinclair players that are playing around with the hero is that they try to play him more as a backline caster, which is fine in team fights and not technically incorrect in the sense that this playstyle is in fact his position in a team fight. However, Sinclair's strength as a split pusher really indicates that he actually doesn't really want to team fight in the first place. I mean, sure, Rabbit Hex and audience participation can be really good at turning a fight around, and it's not as if he doesn't want to fight at all. However, A, most team fights are terrible and really shouldn't have been started, and B, unless Sinclair was in the middle of the fight when it started, he's better off pushing lanes up because he can deal so much damage to walkers. I can't say for certain when exactly this became Sinclair's role. I think I'd have to say around the time they made spirit damage be able to deal the same amount of tower take as gun damage, since his bolts are how he deals 90% of the objective damage that he does. Sinclair has perhaps the weirdest history in all of Deadlock as well, and I don't mean lore-wise. I mean his literal history since his introduction into Hero Labs. Does anyone else remember when he had Seven's gun? And while his kit didn't change much, Sinclair, or Magician as he was first known, is notable to be one of the only heroes that made it out of Hero Labs, somehow passing the incredibly polished Raven for a full introduction to the game. What happened to Raven anyway? Hero Labs were truly a different time. We had Calico turrets, Pocket's cousin Trapper, and Slork. The queue was fun, but ultimately the split queues only increased queue time for both queues overall, and I don't think labs were that popular in the grand scheme of things. Thinking about Hero Labs has reminded me of some other cursed artifacts from the past. Remember when Urn Turnin was in the middle of the map? Those were dark times. I asked a friend of mine who one-tricked Sinclair about anything I might be missing on the hero, and he brought up the Pythagorean theorem, which I thought was funny, especially because it actually does apply. Because the first cast of Vexing Bolt generally should be sending the bolt into the air, and the recast angles it generally downwards into the enemy you're trying to redirect it to, the distance covered between you and your opponent is the square of the hypotenuse, or a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And I wanted to include that because I hadn't really thought of that term since like 9th grade. But it is important because the distance covered plays into the damage that Vexing Bolt does, obviously. I think I owe my math teacher an apology because for once I have indeed actually used math in real life. Finally, audience participation just does not fit Sinclair's kit in my opinion. His whole kit, in theory, is about keeping enemies back with powerful poke and hard CC, with Spectral Assistant as an escape option. So why does he have an ultimate that requires him to get into close quarters if he wants to even have a chance of using it? I specified that his kit works like this in theory, because in practice, as discussed, he enjoys split pushing with no risk of danger to himself. His Rabbit Hex allows him to trivialize enemies for a short period of time, and for some godforsaken reason, he can use everyone else's ultimate at half the cooldown. And this is really powerful. Sure, some heroes' ultimates can only be used by Sinclair with worse than half the effectiveness, like for example Bullet Dance. However, most of those ultimates aren't nearly as impactful in the first place as some of the better ones he could copy. And even worse, those that are extremely impactful, such as Death Slam, Shocking Reanimation, or even Nap Time for example, don't necessarily need one to build for them in the first place, meaning Magician gets those same ult with nearly the same effectiveness at half the cooldown basically for free. And yes, I know what you're about to say, but Fighter Jet, you said that Sinclair's ultimate doesn't work with his kit because shut up. I know what I said. I just said it. I also said that it doesn't work for Sinclair's kit in theory. In practice, he places his assistant, copies the ult, and immediately teleports out for free, where he can then reposition to use it however he wants, completely removing any risk factor that the audience participation ult ever had. And that's right, this video is secretly about audience participation. It's way too effective and way too powerful, and no one talks about it, just because Magician has a crazy low pick rate. If I can rant for a second, let's talk about some specific cases. When he coppins Lycan Curse, Sinclair should absolutely we have to build up the damage for it. I don't understand why he gets a 1-button 14-second cooldown, free 500 HP duff, and double resilly. Sinclair's Death Slam is kind of just a better version of Lash's ult, since he can kidnap people wherever he likes if he swaps with his assistant during the grab, since it brings people with him. Furthermore, Death Slam is regarded as one of the strongest ultimates in the game, yet Sinclair gets to have it at half the cooldown. I'm not even done talking about copy Death Slam. It's pretty common these days to counter by counterspell for an enemy Lash. However, how often is your team going to counter by counterspell in the off chance that Sinclair steals your Lash's ultimate? Obviously the answer is almost zero, which in that sense again makes a copy Death Slam much more effective than a Lash's Death Slam, since it has less chance to be counterspelled. I believe the same assistant swap shenanigans can be done with Holiday's Spirit Lasso, but in truth I haven't checked. Furthermore, Affliction exists at half the cooldown, yet the same effectiveness. I won't go on, but know that I could. Why is it that Hopu's heroes are like this? Every single time I don't like a hero, or in Magician's very specific case of I don't have an issue with him, but I think audience participation is really strong, I found out Hopu helped create them. Paige, Mina, Graves apparently. I love Risk of Rain, and I don't want to be toxic about these heroes, but it just happens to be Hopu every time. In my opinion, a backline mage is just not the type of hero that you should have to prepare too much counter buying for, as they just aren't the type of hero that's, well, in your face too often. Their very nature implies their counterplay, which is to invade their space. So therefore, a hero with built-in counterplay requires less counterplay of counter buying. Of course, Spirit Resist is implied, but I don't think that counter buying, slowing, hex, curse, and or counterspell should be required against this type of hero. That's why Sinclair is Deadlock's weirdest hero. He breaks the convention of how you'd expect his kit to function, he breaks the convention of his role on a team, and he breaks the game because he feels kind of unbalanced in his ultimate in that regard. My name is FighterJet, and the next video will not actually be about why Valve needs to stop buffing Flog, for the love of God. It was going to be, but I have a very interesting and unique position to be in for the next video, so stay tuned for that, and then after that the Lash video will come.